I'm Jim Sproul, Account Relationship Manager with North Central Co-op, and we're near a cornfield here in Fulton County today on this nice, humid, hot August day here towards the end of the growing season to talk a little bit about how we might be able to go out and estimate our corn yields and some of the things that we might see in those cornfields while we're out there doing that. One of the things that I like to do when I come out to a cornfield like this is get out in the cornfield, get out of at least the end rows and get into some of the long rows and get out in there a ways, and then I'll count off my 17.5 feet. The reason I do that is because that basically represents 1/10,000th of an acre. And so then I'll count the number of stalks I've got on either side of me as I go down the center of that row, and I'll average those two numbers together. We've been out in this cornfield for a little while and it counts about 35,000. So that's kind of the number we're going to use to show you how we make this system work. Then we'll pull some ears. We'll bring those ears out and we will count the number of rows around, 8, 10, 12, 14. This one is 16 rows around. Then we'll come down here to the butt and we'll start counting basically when we know we've got a full set of kernels all the way around. And we'll just start counting 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and we're going to call this 37 because we're going to stop up about here. So if we say that we've got 16 rows and we've got 37 kernels long and we've got by 35,000 plants, there's 2 or 3 things we can do with those numbers. One of the things that I like to do is I've got a trusty little spreadsheet that I use, slide rule, and I can actually match up those 16 rows with those 37 kernels long. And like I said before, we've got about 35,000 plants per acre as an average. And so the calculator tells us that we're at about 238 bushels the acre. So that's pretty good. And that's a pretty good ear for that thick of corn. Now the other way you can do it if you don't have the fancy slide rule is you can take that number of kernels, that 16, and multiply it times the 37. And you'll get a number. Let's say the number ends up being 500. And you'll take 4 or 5 years and you'll end up getting 5 different numbers. And you'll take those kernel counts and you'll average them. And for the sake of fun, we will say that the average is 500 on the kernels that you count. Then you can take that 500 kernels times our 35. You don't use 35,000, you only use 35. And you'll have a number then that you can divide by a fudge factor of 0.85 or by 75, and you'll get an estimated yield on this, and it should come out really close. And the reason that you change the numbers a little bit is because the kernels themselves will change in weight. So after you've kind of done that and you get a feel for where your yields are, some of the other things that you might see in your cornfield while you're out there that we found as we were driving around the country today actually that could tell you a story. I always say cornfields can tell you the story. And this was an interesting ear that I can guarantee you when you pull up to this field, you're going to think that these ears are pretty good. They look pretty good from the road. And as soon as you pull back that husk, you realize that there's a whole bunch of these silks that are still intact. And most of us know that when we've got intact silk, that means that they never pollinated. And if they don't pollinate, you don't get any kernels. And so this becomes a challenge if you were trying to yield estimate this because you really don't even have a definite number of rows anywhere and you don't have a definite number of kernels long. And so in order to estimate this yield, you almost have to try to count all the kernels on this ear. Another thing we're seeing some of this year is some people might think this is kind of tipped back, but this is actually what happened to this ear as I pulled it off of the stalk and got ready to peel the husk back. All these silks had been eaten down inside the husk. And so what had happened was the bugs had eaten those silks as this is actually probably about 15 or 20 kernels worth of corn that didn't get pollinated because I'm guessing the bugs ate the silks back to where they couldn't pollinate. Now this ear is going to show you some of that classic tip back, like loss of nitrogen. I pulled this ear specifically from a field that I saw that was really yellow. You could see the nitrogen deficiency moving up the plant, and you can see that by the pink color all of these kernels were pollinated at one time. But because of that lack of nitrogen, they weren't able to develop any farther. And so in summary, this is a great time of the year to get out into your cornfield. I know it's hot, I know you're gonna sweat, but you'll learn a lot if you go out there and you get out into your field, do some walking out there, look for weed control problems, look for bugs, look at your ears, do some yield estimates, you know, and in a couple, 3 years of that, pretty soon you'll be able to really walk into fields and get a feel for where your yields are headed for that fall.